tell you something. If you two never bother me again the rest of my life, I ain't giving up that stuff. I can't. There's good friends of mine out there say, well, he's the boss, you have to do his stuff. That's why I said to you before, you don't understand what the boss for me is that the boss is your boss.
And welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I am your host, Jeff Canarsie. If you're new here, do us a favor and hit the like and subscribe button for those that are coming back. We will be back doing YouTube lives and everything else probably in the next 2 weeks. I want to say like the middle of the second week of May we'll be back, if not a little bit sooner than that. But that is the plan going forward. We also have a new podcast that will be dropping next month, the end of next month as well. So hope you will tune in for that as well, something a little bit different. Anyway, for those of you that are looking for fresh mob content, this is the place to get it. We cover things nobody else does, and our research is beyond what anybody else does on YouTube. So we thank you for joining in, and we hope you enjoy today's little segment. For those of you that know and those of you that don't, a couple of weeks back, there was a mob hit in Australia. And at first, the reports that were coming out were a bit mixed. The Australian police weren't exactly sure what exactly happened, but here we are a couple of weeks removed, and now we know. Like I said, a few weeks ago, there was a murder in the Greenvale section of Melbourne, Australia. That really had all of the earmarkings of a mob hit. And at 4:30 in the morning, John LaTorre, as you can see on the screen, was leaving home. And he was heading to a produce market. And for decades, the LaTorre family had toiled and turned the soil in Victoria's Goulburn Valley. And they basically would sell their produce at the markets. LaTorre, 64, was shot and killed as he exited his home. He was shot multiple times. Victoria police believe that this was, in fact, a mob hit put in motion by Ndrangheta. For those of you that know, Ndrangheta is a Calabrian powerhouse mafia, which has taken over the world as the #1 organized crime faction. Fruit markets, produce stands have always been a large part of the mafia's control in Australia. And just some background. Because Australia specifically is controlled by 9 crime families, or 9 what we call Ndrinas. You also as well have the Lebanese mafia, the Albanian mafia, the Serbian mafia, the Sinaloa cartel, the Yakuza Russian mafia, and you have biker gangs as well. Australia was originally an English penal colony where they sent all of their prisoners. And as you can see, the who's who of organized crime across the board is there. The 9 Ndrinas include the Barbaro Ndrina, the Sergi Ndrina, the Papalia Ndrina, the Trimboli Ndrina, the Arena Ndrina, the Strangio Ndrina, the Italiano Ndrina, the Romeo Ndrina, the Morabito Ndrina, the Alvaro Ndrina, and the Madafri crime family, and the Lupino crime family. In fact, if you do a little research, the Madafris and the Lupinos have always controlled the fruit and produce markets. Is a big thing with organized crime overseas, especially in Europe, but more specifically Australia. And you only have to go back 4 years from now and look into Operation Ephemos, which led to the arrest of 65 mobsters, in which there was a deep investigation into Australian and Calabrian crime families actually working in tandem, both in Calabria and Australia. In court documents, they called the Madafris and the Lupinos major players in organized crime, and named the Alvaro clan as a major force in Calabria and in Australia. Wiretaps would go on to catch Cosimo Casanaro, basically acting as the head of an Ndrangheta family in Calabria, discussing business with Lupino back on the phone in Australia. It's been said that 75% of the cocaine market in the world is controlled by Ndrangheta. So for those of you that are still saying that cartels control that action, It's just not the case anymore. There would be more wiretaps which were picked up by the government, and they're interesting. In an Italian court filing, uh, Canzanaro is also recorded describing how Mr. Lupino, along with other alleged Australian mafia bosses, had sought help in resolving a sentimental type of scandal or a breach of honor involving a relationship between an Australian mafia figure and a woman. That mafia figure was stripped of his standing and had to pay a charge or a dowry, according to the phone wiretaps. The Italian phone taps also recorded Caniziaro describing another fruit picker or a fruit seller, Tony Madafri, as Il Capo Bastone, or the chief stick, one of the leaders of the Australian arm of 'Ndrangheta. So organized crime has always been a big part of Australia and its culture. So let's get back to the murder of LaTorre. LaTorre and his brother are known to the police in the area. John's brother Vincent is widely suspected in a mob hit going back to 1991 of Rocco Iaria. Iaria and Vincent LaTorre were partners in a crime where they pilfered $500,000 from a marketer gardener's home. Before the trial would begin, Iaria disappeared, and LaTorre was acquitted of those crimes. In 1998, when the grave of an elderly woman at a Shepperton cemetery was excavated so her husband could be buried next to her, Iaria's body was found inside of that grave. His body had been wrapped in plastic and doused in lime. LaTorre and Vincent LaTorre and two other brothers, Mario and Frank, refused to give evidence at a 2006 inquest into Iaria's death, according to reports at the time, saying that they didn't want to incriminate themselves or have any involvement. The coroner, Parisa Spanos, later found that Vincent LaTorre either killed Iaria or ordered his death, probably because it would ensure his acquittal on the robbery charges. The LaTorres are not mentioned in the intelligence reports, despite the fact that Vincent LaTorre being suspected of standing over other families involved a fresh produce industry about the time the report was completed. He was found guilty of those charges in 2009, but has maintained that he had nothing to do with Iaria's death. So looking over the files and dozens of reports, the fruit trade and the produce trade, as mentioned, is a big hub of 'Ndrangheta business. And the complete infrastructure is controlled by organized crime, according to reports coming out now. The murder of a LaTorre, who is alleged to have had high standing within 'Ndrangheta, the murder was actually greenlit by elder bosses. And the question becomes why? Obviously, I'm not going to know that answer, but a lot of people are speculating that there is a vast leadership vacuum or a changing of the old world guard in Melbourne. And as a result of that change, LaTorre was hit. Ndrangheta often kills for three reasons. One is revenge, two is to prevent somebody from talking, or three, it's very demonstrative. And what I mean by demonstrative is they're sending a message. And so for Ndrangheta to call attention to oneself in a hit that was so brazen, it's definitely a message that's being sent. What's also interesting about this murder is the fact that a motorcycle could be heard leaving the area right after the shots rang out. In a 2022 report, it was said that while biker gangs are in full swing in Australia, Ndrangheta actually has wide control over them and what they do. So there is some sort of idea that this is maybe a possibly farmed out hit. The concern now with Australian authorities, albeit, everything that's going on, is retaliation. And my gut sort of tells me, considering all that we do know about how Ndrangheta does function and given LaTorre's high standing, that it's basically a message. They're sending a message. Is there a possibility, excuse me, is there a possibility that this could be some sort of retaliation for his brother's hit on Iaria? Don't know. I'm not in those circles, couldn't tell you. But for Ndrangheta the last decade, especially in Australia, they have not, for any reason at all, been conducting murders over there. Yes, granted, in Canada we're seeing it, in Europe we're seeing it, but we're not seeing it in Australia in the last decade. So that's why this is so different, because of the way that Ndrangheta sort of moves back and forth. To do a hit That is pretty brazen, even though it was at 4:30 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, whatever the case may be. It's still brazen because his family is the one that found him seconds after he was shot. They heard the gunshots. So for them to come out and sort of do that sort of murder, especially when they like to sort of remain low key, it speaks volumes as to why it was done. Uh, if you compare and contrast this to Canada, they're doing this in broad daylight in Canada now. So the messages are still being sent. Where it goes from here, I'm not sure, but this was a alleged high-ranking member of Andromeda in Australia. And so now it's okay. Is it going to be a tit for tat type of situation? I'm not really sure, but I do think, looking at the totality of what all of this is, it's a message. Somebody was sending a message. You're done, and it's either controlling a narrative, maybe more demonstrative. But the murder could not have happened without somebody sanctioning it and giving the green light to do it. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going on, down the line from this, whether or not there's jockeying for positions. We've seen this before. We're seeing it in Canada now. And what's very interesting, I think, especially when you look at Canada, not to jump subjects really quick, but what's interesting in Canada is that the bikers have their own sort of turf and territory which they run. And what you're seeing in Canada specifically now is anybody that was sort of a fringe associate with the Rizzutos or anybody like that, or Sicilian organized crime, is actually sort of running to the bikers for help now. And it's very interesting to sort of see the way that that's fleshing out. The Rizzutos is still trying to keep a firm grasp on what they have, but Andromeda is controlling the action like they always have the last 20 or so years. A lot of people forget that the Rizzutos really didn't come into power until the 1970s. And prior to that, it was actually Vic Catroni who ran everything in Canada, and he is considered Andromeda, even though he ran his family more like a traditional Sicilian organized crime family. So it's interesting to see that in Canada, the bikers still have a lot of space to move, whereas over in Australia, Andromeda controls every move they make. So it's a little interesting to see the differences between Canada and Australia, whether or not there's another murder, related to the LaTorre hit. That's going to be interesting. And I think if you see another murder in the next couple of weeks, then it's obviously going to be retaliation. But it is what it is. A lot of people don't cover Australia. A lot of people don't even cover Canada. So I just thought that I would bring you something a little different today. And we'll see. The next few weeks is going to be interesting, and we can talk about this on the next live that we do. Like I said, we are probably legitimately, just looking at the calendar today being the 28th, I think probably the second week in May we'll be back. Same content, not hiding from anybody. Haven't been hiding, just took a break. That's what we do. If anybody thought that I was going to shrivel and disappear, you're out of your minds. That's not going to happen. And we're going to continue to bring you the most up-to-date information on organized crime and the facts, backed up by documents and sources rather than delusions, which a lot of people do. I know there's a lot going on YouTube. There's a lot of people talking about other things, but I'm going to stay away from that type of stuff. We're just going to keep it centrally focused here on history, which is what we've always done and what we will continue to do. Anyway, do me a favor, hit the like, hit the subscribe, check out our podcast on mobtalkradioshow.supercast.com. And we'll see everybody in a couple weeks. In the meantime, we'll be dropping a lot of content and etc. If you have not, if you're into wrestling and wrestling is your thing, head on over to Lee Cole's Wrestling with the Devil. I was on his show last night for about 2 hours. We talked about Vince McMahon, a little mob history, and I've enjoyed doing it. It's definitely a break from all the crazy drama that goes on here on YouTube. But all that being said, everybody have a great week. And like I said, we'll be releasing a little bit of content here in the next couple of weeks. We got a lot of stuff planned, got some documentaries that are finally done. So all systems go. Have a great week. And once again, hit that like or subscribe button.